The City Council of Strasbourg watched people dance themselves toward death, and then hired musicians to keep the music playing. It was July 1518, and dozens of men and women had been convulsing through the streets for days without stopping, without sleeping, without any apparent will to quit. The question that has never been satisfactorily answered is not what made them dance. It is why the people responsible for public order looked at a mass medical emergency and chose, in writing, to make it louder. Welcome to the grim archive. Tonight's file, the dancing plague of 1518. Strasbourg in the summer of 1518 was not a city at ease. The Holy Roman Empire pressed down on it from every direction. The previous years had brought failed harvests, episodes of syphilis, and a plague outbreak that had not fully released its grip. The Rhine Valley recorded famine conditions as recently as 1517. The population was exhausted, malnourished, and living inside a framework of religious fear that had no secular vocabulary for the body's suffering. That context matters. It is the soil in which everything that followed was able to grow. The first documented case was a woman named Frau Troffea. The exact date is recorded as mid-July 1518. She stepped into a narrow street in Strasbourg and began to dance. Contemporary accounts, drawn from the city's own civic records and the reports of the physicians the council consulted, describe her moving without music, without apparent joy, without stopping. She danced through the first day, then the second, then the fifth. By the end of the first week, accounts differ on the precise number, but between 30 and 34 people had joined her. None of them, as far as any record shows, had planned to. Within a month, the number had climbed to somewhere between 100 and 400 individuals, depending on which contemporary source you consult. The physician accounts and the city chronicles do not agree on the count. They do agree on the symptoms. People danced until their feet bled. Some collapsed. Some, the records state, died. From exhaustion, from stroke, from heart failure. The Strasbourg Municipal Council records, the primary documents on which modern historians rely, do not dramatize it. They simply note the numbers, the duration, and the growing alarm of the city's authorities. The alarm, at least, was real. What they did with it is the part that requires explanation. The City Council convened. This is where the documentary record becomes genuinely strange. The magistrates of Strasbourg were not ignorant men. They governed a sophisticated imperial city with established legal and administrative infrastructure. They consulted physicians. They consulted the local clergy. The physicians, working entirely within humoral medical theory, concluded that the dancing was caused by overheated blood, that the afflicted were suffering from a natural imbalance. Their prescribed treatment, the one the council formally adopted, was that the dancing must be allowed to continue until the fever burned itself out. More movement, not less. The council did not stop there. They issued formal decrees. Those decrees instructed that the city's grain market hall be opened as a dedicated space for the dancing to continue. They arranged for the city's guildhalls to also be made available. And then they hired musicians, professional drummers and pipers, paid from city funds, to provide continuous music for the afflicted. The reasoning recorded in the council minutes is clinical in its wrongness. Sustained rhythm, the physicians advised, would help the sufferers expel the corrupted humors more efficiently. The council believed them. The musicians showed up. The drums began. What the council had created, whether they understood it or not, was a supervised spectacle. The sick were now contained in a designated space, accompanied by paid performers, observed by city officials. It had the administrative shape of a solution. It had none of the outcomes of one. The dancing continued. People continued to collapse. The chronicle records do not give us precise death tolls from this period. The numbers that circulate, sometimes cited as 15 per day at the peak, come from later and less reliable sources. What the primary records do confirm is that the council's intervention did not slow the outbreak. It may have concentrated it. The clergy had offered a different diagnosis. Several local priests argued that the affliction was divine punishment, specifically the curse of Saint Vitus, a martyr whose shrine at Saverne was associated in popular belief with diseases of involuntary movement. The council initially dismissed this framing in favor of the physician's humoral explanation. But as the dancing continued and the medical intervention produced nothing, the council reversed course. By late August, the afflicted were loaded onto wagons and transported to the shrine at Saverne to seek religious intercession. The musicians were dismissed. The grain market hall was closed. The council had tried the worst theory first. Here is what the historical record cannot fully resolve. The outbreak did end. Accounts suggest it subsided through September 1518, though the exact timeline is imprecise in the sources. But no document confirms whether the shrine visit caused the remission, whether the removal of the musicians and the change of environment broke some social feedback mechanism, or whether the episode simply exhausted itself as such episodes sometimes do. The council recorded the outcome. They did not record the cause. And so the decision to hire musicians, to open the hall, to prescribe more dancing, that decision sits in the archive, formally documented, without any subsequent official explanation or acknowledgement that it had failed. Modern historians have proposed several frameworks for the outbreak. The most durable current hypothesis, advanced most fully by historian John Waller in his 2008 book, A Time to Dance, A Time to Die, is that the plague was a mass psychogenic illness, a collective stress response triggered by the accumulated trauma of famine, disease, and religious terror. Waller's research draws directly on the Strasbourg municipal records. His conclusion about the council's response is measured but plain. They operated within the only medical theory available to them, and chose an intervention that was coherent within that theory and catastrophically wrong in practice. The humoral framework gave them confidence. The confidence killed people. The dancing plague of 1518 is not unique in the historical record. Episodes of mass psychogenic illness have been documented across centuries and cultures, in medieval convents, in 20th century factories, in schools. What makes 1518 different is the paper trail. Strasbourg was a literate, administratively sophisticated city. The council kept minutes. The physicians wrote reports. The chronicle keepers recorded the numbers. And so we have, preserved in German and Latin, a complete documentary account of an institution confronting something it did not understand, and choosing action over admission of ignorance. The archive does not judge them. It simply holds the record open. The grain market hall in Strasbourg no longer stands. The shrine at Saverne still does. The council minutes from 1518 are held in the Archives de la Ville et de l'Eurométropole de Strasbourg, where they have been examined by researchers for 2 centuries. They remain, as John Waller and others have noted, among the most complete primary accounts of a mass psychogenic event anywhere in the pre-modern world. The musicians were paid, the decree was written, the drums played while people died, and the men who ordered it believed, until the evidence became impossible to ignore, that they were helping. The next file is already open. Subscribe. The archive is always open.